everybody. Welcome to the Route Consultant Weekly Webinar. For those of you who are here for the first time, my name is Josh Gregory. I am the Vice President of Education here at Route Consultant. If you're not familiar with us, our team ran hundreds of routes across the country in both P&D and Linehaul. And today, really, we're here to help both new buyers that are trying to figure out if this is the right space for them to come in with eyes wide open. And then for everybody who's a current contractor, that we continue to talk about things happening in the space so we can always work together, bring ideas together, and find ways to be more profitable and grow as the space continues to change. Now, if you are here every week, welcome back. And again, whether you're here every week or this is your first time, we always want this to be a place where you can come, learn, and ask as many questions as you have, whether it's about what we talk about today or anything you have about the industry as a whole. Before I go too much longer, I do have a quick disclaimer to read. So Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. So again, if you've never been here, quick flow of the webinar today. We will go over some things that we want to talk about, both announcements and some content for the day. I'm going to go over a couple of updates on new listings that have come out this week, and then we will open it up for pure Q&A. So again, like I said, any questions you have, there's a little Q&A button at the bottom of the window. Just make sure that you type those in and submit them. You don't have to wait till I open it up for Q&A at the end. You can submit it at any point while I'm talking today. And then when we get to Q&A at the end, we will address those, talk through them, and be here as long as you guys have questions. So for those of you who are already contractors, this is the time of the year where it is pedal to the metal. We've got Black Friday in a week, and your resources really have to start to be in place already. But what we wanted to do is both today and in the next few webinars, we wanted to talk through and remind everyone of the critical things that you have to have in place as you bring in these employees and as you think about the employees you're going to bring in at the beginning of next year to both protect yourself and set the right expectations for those employees. And again, for those of you looking to get into the industry, it is just as important, if not more so, that you're listening this and using this to create your onboarding process in advance so that when you can get in, you'll really be successful. And like I said, this will be a multi-part series, but what we wanted to start with this week is employee handbooks and really explaining what those are, where you start with them, why they're important. And again, we've brought on Alex Froome to talk through it all. And so, Alex, you can go ahead and say hello, and then we'll do a quick announcement.
Hey, everyone. How you guys doing?
Alex, it's a pleasure always to have you back here.
Yes, my pleasure as well. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, and I'll be honest, like if you're not ready for peak right now, there's nothing that Josh or I can do to help you out.
Yeah.
Or it's already started. We'll be going full bore. For FedEx, officially peak starts on Saturday, November 23rd. Effectively for me, it started about 2 to 3 weeks ago when I started picking up additional runs for my areas. I will probably be doing an additional 13 to 15,000 miles a week on top of what I typically did on an annual basis. Um, so just to give you an idea, I'm going to be probably about 20% more volume, more miles driven on a weekly basis than I did prior to peak. Um, so before we get into talking about the employee handbooks and talking about what we want to go through, one thing I want to mention is My Ground Biz, FedEx just announced that there's going to be a new accident procedures released effective January 1st. We don't have a whole lot of details. The detail says that they're going to come out on January 1st. But in essence, what it says is that once you have an accident, you have 30 days to respond and to contest and dispute the accident. FedEx will then have 10 days to escalate your dispute. And then once the dispute is escalated, FedEx has 30 days to respond back to you. So in essence, you have an accident on November 1st. By November 30th, you have to submit your dispute form to FedEx. FedEx then has 10 days to process it, and then 30 days after that. So you're looking at probably January 10th or 9th before FedEx can come back to you and say, this is, what our judgment is on it. In general, FedEx assumes all accidents are preventable. So you are guilty until proven innocent in this matter. But recently, FedEx has actually been a lot more reasonable. Josh and I were just talking earlier. I had a couple of rear end collisions. It's actually kind of freaked me out where, like, my guy is just driving down the road, minding his own business, and somebody comes out of the blue and decides to rear end me. And trust me, you do not want to rear end a steel framed trailer. The trailer is going to win out every single time. This is a frame that's meant to hold 50,000 pounds. So it's really sturdy and I mean, your pickup trucks, your SUVs, anything out there is just going to lose that fight. So
Yeah.
it's been mind-boggling. I've had three of them happen in the last like 6 months. Like my guys are just driving in the right lane, following the speed limit or even under the speed limit, and we've been rear-ended. So, my one caveat to that is, if you're a pedestrian out there or a civilian, just driving your own personal vehicle, get off the cell phone. There should be no reason why you should be on that cell phone when you're on the highway. So that's my safety message for the week.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad we had you here for the safety huddle this week for everybody to pay attention. I need to send this one to my mother, who I still am. It is if I can't ride in the car with her while she drives because her phone is out 50% of the time, and it blows my
It's,
mind.
it's so scary. I see it all the time. Like somebody's like, "Oh, I'm just driving along," you know. Like this is a bad look when you're doing this. Like you have the cell phone up here and you have that's a bad
Uh,
that
and
usually when you get
I
into
get a
an accident.
large amount of rage every day. There's a certain stoplight that the person at the front of the line always is on their phone texting instead of turning left when I need them to. And like, I miss that light because I know that they were texting. It ruins like the first half of the day for me. So
Um, so the dispute process, I will tell you this is wonderful. I'm really excited. This is something that I've brought up to FedEx myself and other contractors have. We wanted to improve this process, and this is from feedback. This is FedEx being responsive to contractors and saying, "Hey, we need a better process," and being responsive to it. So I'm excited about this. I don't know what the form looks like that you have to submit. I imagine it's going to utilize in some format the ATA's guide to determining accident preventability. If you want, I can repeat that. It's the ATA's guide to determining accident preventability. It's a pamphlet. It's a PDF that you can order online. I think it's like usually retails for about $29. Every contractor should have it, and anybody interested in becoming a contractor should. That's one of the things that you should look at. Um, it's just such a useful tool. So let's talk about employee handbooks.
yeah.
So this I am going to share with you. This is my Alpha Kilo employee handbook. Okay. Every single one of my trucks has not a red binder, they have a black binder, but they have a binder that has the employee handbook in it. Additionally, I use ADP, but you can use Paychex or Gusto or whatever. They all have the ability for you to store documents on the website. And so all my drivers also have the employee handbook on in the app in my ADP app. And every single time I make a change to it, and we make changes more often than I was expecting when I first established an employee handbook, um, they have to acknowledge it. And so they actually have to scroll through all the pages. I would hope that they would read it, but they have to scroll through all the pages and they have to sign and date that they have acknowledged receiving the employee handbook. And that's important for legal matters. Okay. But anyway, so then you have my table of contents. Yes, I have a two-page table of contents. You cannot read this because it's too small, but we will go through these details. Okay. And it's really important. This is how you protect your business. Okay. This is how you protect your business legally. This is how you protect your business operationally. This is how you protect your business with FedEx. Doesn't say that they hint at, they encourage, they suggest that everybody have an employee handbook, but they're not allowed to mandate it because we're not franchisees. But you cannot do certain things within the FedEx universe without having an employee handbook. So, there are certain things that every contractor should have in it, and then there are things that are state specific. So I will not be able to comment about the state specific. I operate in 5 states, And so those 5 states are covered in my employee handbook, and they cover everything from hiring and firing practices, EEOC, so equal opportunity, um, uh, my how my employees can grieve or the grievance process, anti-retaliation and whistleblower policy. These are all things that are required by law to have in an employee handbook. And so you can get with ADP, you can get with Paychecks. There are a lot of different organizations out there that can assist you in doing this. We all have to have something called EPLI, which is Employment Practice Liability Insurance. A lot of the insurance companies that provide you with EPLI, so think of Marsh or Robert Ryan or Dave Campbell, Dave Clayton, whoever you're using for insurance, they will be able to steer you in the right direction to make sure that you have the right policies in place regarding equal opportunity employer and OSHA and gender discrimination and all those kind of things that you need to have in place to make sure that you are never in trouble legally with a state. And that's important. Even with the Trump administration, you're still going to have equal opportunity. Okay. It's just not going to go away. So just trust me on this.
Well, a
Other
quick
things that
point on the state side. So does it, line haul, you're traveling between multiple states. Does it only matter where you dispatch when you're trying to figure out the right legal procedures that you have to follow?
Yes. So, it follows the same tax jurisdictions that you in. So we don't pay taxes in every state that we drive through. We pay taxes in where your trucks are domiciled because that's where you're generating your revenue. So I happen to have trucks that are domiciled in Tennessee, Mississippi, and Kentucky. And then I happen to live in Colorado, and then my company is organized in Illinois. So even though I don't have any Illinois employees anymore, I still have to have Illinois policies in place. That's a whole nother can of worms, so we won't go there. But I do need to have like workers' comp is different and how it's treated. The Family Medical Leave Act, which is FMLA, is different in Colorado than it is in Mississippi and Tennessee. Kentucky has some nuances with regarding to the Fair Standards Labor Act, so I have to have those in place. So these are all things that you need to work with, whoever you're trust me, it's worth it to spend a couple $100 to maybe even $1,000 to work with an HR provider or a legal team and say, hey, make sure I have all the appropriate OSHA and legal and regulatory requirements to operate in the state that I operate in. Because the last thing you want is to get rid of an employee, don't do the proper paperwork, and then they sue you for discrimination.
Yeah.
And then the things that I have in my employee handbook for me personally to talk about and to make sure that I'm covering myself and just to make sure I operate, these are covering my standard operating procedures, as well as taking items out of FedEx, out of the contract to give my employee handbook teeth to make sure that my drivers know that they have to behave in a certain way. Otherwise, my contract is a risk. So I have an introduction that talks about my employee handbook, and then it talks about changes in policy and how that is communicated to my drivers. Then I have a general employment, so it talks about why I do with I-9 and what I do with all the information I collect on the I-9. That's also covers all the state regulatory issues that you have. So some of my states are at will, some of my states are not, so I have to cover those. Um, and then I have an employment status and record keeping. So the classification of my drivers that they are paid by the mile. If I have any part-time employees, talks about part-time and what status they have, how many hours do you have to work to become full-time? What does it mean to be an entry-level driver? What does it mean to be a lead driver? What does it mean to be a driver trainer? And what does it mean to be an assistant manager? Because these are all different classifications and then I have my managers as well in there. What do I do with their personal records that I keep? How is it stored? What am I doing with travel expenses? And then per diem. Drivers really care about per diem. They all know about it. They want to know what the per diem policy is and how do you handle per diem. And I recommend that you follow the IRS guidelines on per diem. You don't want to get audited forever, ever for per diem because that's a lot of back taxes that you might have to pay. Then I have an employee conduct. It talks about dress code. It talks about how do we enter a tractor, how do we exit a tractor, 3 points of contact, goes through how do we hook up, how we break down sets, and all these things are listed here to protect me in the event that I have a workers' comp claim. So if I have a driver exiting the vehicle and not using 3 points of contact, and I catch it on video or catch it with other people observing, they've violated company policy. And if they get injured, that's on them, not on me. So that's important to understand. If they're
So
not,
for
yeah.
like that, it's a scenario where you caught them. Is it something where is the employee handbook protect you enough, or would you have to also have some kind of coaching of them? Like is there any follow through you have to do, or does the employee handbook protect you completely there?
I mean, the employee handbook protects me completely there. I mean, we do coaching when we catch drivers who are exiting the vehicle not using 3 points of contact. Like they should always be facing the cab when they enter and exit the vehicle. Like turning around and walking down, like facing forward is just you're gonna have somebody injured. So it's important. I've never had a situation where, I mean, I've had workers' comp claims, but nothing for like that. But I've heard stories about it protecting other people, like when the insurance adjuster determines and the driver makes a statement saying, "Hey, I fell out of the truck." And they're like, "Well, how did you fall out of the truck?" And they talk about like I was facing forward, I was trying to reach at something, and the door was open, and I was trying to reach for something in the window. Well, were you using 3 points of contact when you're doing this? No, I just kind of lost my balance. Well, then that's on you, not on that contractor because they had this protection in there. Workplace safety, drug and alcohol use. And so all these things are coming from Schedule E in the contract that talks about, what you can and cannot do. And so like if I have a driver who it gets caught violating drug use, they can't come back to me for an unemployment claim in this situation because they violated the terms of our agreement of my employee handbook. And so they were fired for cause, and so they no longer could claim unemployment benefits from me. So these are all things to protect you as well as to protect your drivers to make sure that they stay safe. Then we have like my payroll and benefits policy talking about like how do I pay, when do I pay, what is the leave policy, when can you use leave, when can you not use leave, health insurance, deductions, bonuses, you have to have a military leave policy. So if one of your employees is in the reserves or National Guard and they get called up to active duty, you have to have a policy in place that talks about what happens, and you cannot discriminate against those people. That is a big no-no on the federal side. I have an hours of service chapter. I have an accident procedures and disqualification criteria chapter. I have a DOT inspection requirement. So, what is my expectation for you doing a pre-trip and post-trip inspection? And then it also talks about what is my expectation of how you behave when you get pulled over for a roadside inspection. Um, and then it talks about monthly safety training, open door policy, the video. This is where my drivers acknowledge that they understand that they're being recorded, and that information is, company policy and it's not going to be distributed other than to FedEx. And when it gets distributed to FedEx, it's going to be blurred. So all this information is captured and then caught in my employee handbook. And then, as things change, like as we make a decision to make an adjustment to our employee handbook, like for example, recently I decided I'm instituting deer guards on all my vehicles. So I am updating my employee handbook to to tell my drivers that yes, they still have to open the cab of their vehicle, the hood of their vehicle. And then this is all the deer guards are the same, and this is how you unhook the deer guards. This is how you lower it, and this is how you open the hood. And then it also explains what happens with deer strikes, because we've had a bunch of deer strikes this past year. You know,
Yeah.
there's not enough hunters out there, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's reality.
Yeah.
Great for those who do hunt. They've got more than enough to find, but
But yeah, so the employment handbook is really, really important. And there's so many times where a driver will be like, "Well, I didn't know that." I'm like, "It's in your employee handbook. I have
yeah,
proof that you acknowledged it." "Well, I didn't read my employee handbook. I didn't know I was supposed to read it." Like, yes, you did. It's
on
very
you. Yeah.
important process.
Yeah.
so it's a big protection. So I highly recommend that you build one yourself. I sell mine. There are probably some contractors out there that will share it for free potentially. I think Route Consultants has a pretty robust employee handbook as well. I think I want to say in 2019 or 2020 at the expo, there was a session with a legal team talking about what you needed to have in your employee handbook.
Yeah.
And I always found that very useful. I now have I'm a big enough company that I have an HR manager. And I tell you, I mean, she is on the OSHA and the EEOC and the employment website. She gets emails from our 5 states on a regular basis. She takes care of our FMCSA requirements to make sure that we're always up to snuff with that. So, and it's important. Like you don't want to come across and not have this information. I mean, I-9 is a big deal with FedEx. I've never been audited on an I-9, but I've heard of other contractors being audited, and it's painful. And FedEx it's a requirement under FedEx, and FedEx reserves the right for them to audit you to make sure that you're conducting your I-9s, and that you're segregating the information and maintaining the records. And that's important because there's very stringent segregation rules with your I-9s. You cannot how do they say it? You cannot aggregate the information and store it with all your other material. It actually has to be segregated and stored in a separate place. So the nice thing about I use ADP and I've used Paychex in the past, and the one nice thing is both of them have a service where you can submit your I-9s and they do the verification for you, and they will also be your repository for the information. And they then, once you sign up with them, they'll take responsibility and they conduct annual audits, and they report and if you get audited by FedEx or the federal government, they will step in and handle that information for you.
Got it. Okay. So one of the things I think that it's kind of helpful for people to understand. So you touched on it, but how early after you have, what part of the onboarding process do you introduce them to the employee handbook? Is it like really early on they can see it, or is it wait like right before they start?
And so as soon as it's part of the process of them loading into and onboarding into our payroll systems.
Got
So
it.
so what we do is typically we start the onboarding process right around the road test. So at that point in time, my managers are taking ownership of that driver from our HR manager or recruiter, and we're starting to teach them the FedEx way of doing things. Because at that point, you've already made the decision that you're going to hire this person. If they've passed that road test, you've made the decision that you're going to hire this person. So at that point, we're badging them. It usually takes 2 to 3 days for them to get approved by FedEx anyways. So we're bringing him into work. We're spending time talking about how we hook up, how we break down sets, how we handle the dolly, how we do pre-trip and post-trip inspections. How the Omnitrax works if they've never used an Omnitrax. Making sure they're aware that there's a camera. How does the camera work? Can you block the camera? Can you not block the camera? What is the purpose? All those kind of things, teaching them about MTA, but at the same time, they're going through the process of onboarding through ADP, which is my payroll system. But even if I use Paychex or Gusto or QuickBooks, that's where you're collecting all your bank information. You're filing their W-4. For me, even though they're not eligible for healthcare, dental, vision, and 401(k) benefits at that time, I'm collecting that information so that once they hit that 60 or 90-day window, it automatically triggers and gets implemented. And so we have a smooth transition that they've hit their 60-day anniversary, and then on the 61st day, they are now eligible for healthcare. Because we've already submitted the information. So at that time, when they're going through this process, one of the pages of them uploading their information is like, section 1, section 2, section 3. I think it's section like 5 or 6 before they can say, finalize. They get access to the employee handbook, and a couple other onboarding items that we require them to acknowledge. The acknowledgement says that I have received my employee handbook and they initial off on it. I've been been taught how to use a dolly. I've been taught how to do pre-trip and post-trip inspections. I've been taught how to do this and that. So all these things, there's like 10 items that they have to initial off, saying that their manager has taught them, and then the manager also has to sign off. But before that step is the employee handbook, where they get to have that employee handbook. And then, like I said, every single time we make a change, and I want to say we probably get a notification from a state or a regulatory agency at least 4 or 5 times a year. Like they'll change, you know, EEOC, like the EEOC language has changed, slightly. Like they've decided, or they've made a change to the Family Medical Leave Act. Like one of my states have done that. Or there's been a judgment about the Fair Standards Labor Act, and we've been told that we need to include like the word and instead of just or. And so then we'll have to make a change. So we'll make that change. And then, it kicks through and the drivers have to acknowledge it again. So there's
Yeah.
multiple times. And that's I mean, like I said, I mean, there's a copy in every single tractor. Now that one is not updated. That one's usually done. We do that on an annual basis unless there's like been a big change. Like we just did after the last contract renewal, we made a big change to some of the disqualifications criteria because FedEx had changed it. So we had to make a big change to our disqualification criteria, and so we just updated everything on that point.
Okay. So I hear you that you've got a really good system in place at this point of ways that, you've got internal teams, you've kind of got a process. When
Mhm.
you started, did you immediately come in with an employee handbook, or what did that look like at the beginning?
No, I didn't know. I mean, I think I mean, when I first got up and running, I was like, oh, I need an employee handbook, and that was like on the back of my mind, and it just started morphing out. Like, I would ask my manager, like, how do we do this? I'm like, and he's like, this is how we do it. I'm like, okay, can you put it in writing for me? And he would be like, no, I can dictate it to you. I can't type,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, great. So he would dictate it to me, or we'd sit down and I write it up, and then, over time, I kept building up this standard operating procedure that eventually became my employee handbook. Um, and a lot of it was based around safety was the biggest is the big items. Like I wanted to address safety is so important with FedEx that I wanted to address safety in it. Um, and then from there, I realized that when I expanded from just Tennessee and expanded into Kentucky, I was like, wait, the states are not the same. Like there's different rules about equal EEOC and FMLA and all these different things. And I'm like, okay. So I went to Paychecks at the time and I'm like, okay, can you help me out here? And they're like, yeah, for $50 a month, you can sign up for our whatever service. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I'll do that. So I signed up for this service and they kind of gave me like a boilerplate of all the OSHA and EEOC and all these different things for all the states I operated. And I was like, okay, great. And then I stopped paying for them. I just paid for like literally for 3 months to get all the stuff. And then I sat there and I have all this mishmash. I kind of like organized it, I put it all together, and I was like, give it to my manager, and he's like, this is hot mess. What are you doing?
Yeah.
So, and then I was like, okay, so we need to reorganize. And so then I went back to Paychecks. And then as I went back to Paychecks, kind of got them to help me massage it a little bit. And then at that time, I hired an HR, actually, I hired a senior admin from FedEx. And I said, here's my employee handbook. I know you've seen them at FedEx all the time because if you want to, if you want to start an entry-level driver training program, you need to submit your employee handbook to FedEx. Um, and so I was like, okay, can you you've seen hundreds of these things because you've been a senior admin for 15 years. Can you make ours the best? And she's like, yep, got it. And, so she, cleaned it up, organized it better, put table of context and everything. And so that now that's what you have now. And then we work at it consistently. Like we just did a driver job descriptions, like really expanded what a driver is, what a lead driver is, what an entry level driver is. And now we're working on manager job descriptions. Um, and so everybody knows, And so the idea with those job descriptions is not only are they going to be in the employee handbook, but they're also going to be part of the onboarding process. And all my drivers are going to acknowledge in writing that they read through what their job description is. And so they can't say, well, I'm not going to do that. The last thing, at the end of the day, if I'm paying
Yeah.
you to do a day's worth of work, you're going to do, these are the things that you're going to do. So if I say, you know what, we don't have a load for you today, I need you to take this truck to the truck wash, then you're going to take that truck to the truck wash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It, so, let's say there's somebody who comes to us, you and I help them build an employee handbook, but they haven't started yet. They're new investor. I think a lot of people I talk to have kind of trepidation about, do I just immediately come in and try to put this employee handbook on drivers that I don't have any credibility with yet, that maybe they already have an employee handbook? Do you think it's a day one setting of expectations, or do you come back to it? What's kind of your opinion
Oh, I
there?
mean, I think if you're a brand new contractor, you bring that employee handbook in place. I mean, first of all, you want to see what the I mean, during your due diligence process, you're going to get the opportunity to review the existing contractors, the seller's employee handbook. And there might like I exchange notes with other contractors all the time about employee handbooks. I mean, I don't know where it is right now. Oh, sorry, here. This is a draft standard operating procedures of another contractor. I'm reviewing this and saying, hey, this is some good stuff. I'm gonna, add this. This is a lot of it's talking about driver training and how they do face-to-face training. So I'm incorporating that as we speak into my employee handbook, and so that's going to be something else that's going to get rolled out in my employee handbook. So yeah, so drivers are not going to quit because you put in place an employee handbook. Okay. Drivers are not going to quit for that reason. Hell, I'll tell you this. Okay. I bought 4 runs 6 months ago now. I think I told you about it in May. I bought 4 runs. They were getting paid 10 cents higher than I paid them. I said, sorry, you are all offered jobs, but this is my pay scale.
Mhm.
And, you know, 3 of the drivers came over and came to work for, no, yeah, 3 of the drivers came over and came to work with me. 2 of them are still with me to this day. And one of them just referred a driver to me. So like, it's not, they appreciate how we operate. They appreciate our trucks and our, I mean, like I said, I mean, I'm not the highest paid contractor in any yard that I work with. I'm just, I'm very by the book. So all my drivers know that this is the standard. I don't, I don't go off the standard. I hold all my drivers accountable to it. I treat everybody the same. I don't care if you're red, white, blue, or purple. I don't care if you're straight, I mean, I don't even care if you're a furry. You can do anything you want as long as you can drive a tractor and a trailer with a set of trailers and you can follow the FMCSAs and the DOT regulations and you're safe. I could care less what you're doing with your off time. It doesn't matter to me. The
Yeah.
most important thing to me is that you're safe and you want to be safe at all times.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, and I think that's worth just kind of emphasizing that this is something that it is difficult if you do this on your own. I will say that if you come in and try on day one to have, if you're a new investor and you've never asked for anyone else for help in building one of these employee handbooks, you just kind of try to build it and submit it on your own, that's probably going to be difficult. But it is something that the amount of time and heartache you will save by having this on day one, having
Mhm.
it as a foundation and setting expectations for all of your employees to follow, for everyone to be held accountable to. So, because if you don't, what I have seen people do is they've said, I know I need an employee handbook. I'll come back in 6 months and come back and look at it. And 3 months in, they have an issue that if they had had an employee handbook there to set the standard and protect them, it would have, but because they waited, it didn't. So it may not be a huge amount of time to invest if you work with somebody else, but it is something that's critical to kind of set the right foundation from day one. And so that's why we talk
Yeah.
about
And
it.
like
Yeah.
I said, I mean, you can buy an employee handbook. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm more than willing to sell mine. There are plenty of other contractors that are willing to sell theirs. I mean, I think Route Consult, I mean, I'm not sure if you guys actually sell my employee handbook or have an amalgamation of mine and Dave and Amy's, but there's a process there. It is it's a necessary tool. I mean, you will find yourself coming, I mean, give you a perfect example. I had a driver lose his crap in dispatch and a, dropped the no-no word in dispatch.
Yeah.
Okay. I fired him on the spot. He tried to file a complaint, and I went straight to my employee handbook and I said, I have a code of conduct, and this language is unacceptable and not allowed to be used. And I wanted, I mean, it was, I mean, literally, like the lawyer wrote to me. I responded back with my employee handbook, and he said, I'm sorry to bother you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's as simple as that. That's what you want.
Yeah. So it's really, really important. And I will say it will save you money over. It's a necessary investment. And get with somebody, get with route consultants. And the other thing is, like, always be open-minded to changing your employee handbook. Like, regulations and requirements change over time. FedEx, the contract changes every year. They add a wrinkle to the disqualification criteria every year. They make a change to their Schedule G, the insurance indemnification, every year. These are all things that need to be captured in your employee handbook. Like, go to the expo, go to the Ford Summit, go to the Linehaul Summit, go to the sessions where they're talking about payroll and benefits, and they're talking about employee handbook and employment practices, and take notes.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody wants to focus on, like, how can I buy trucks cheaper and stuff like that? That's just a negotiating, and you're going to save yourself maybe a couple $1,000. This could save your business.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep. And yeah, exactly what you said. And I think it's one of the most important preventative things you can do to protect yourself in the long run. So that's a lot of most of what we wanted to cover here. Like we talked about, we tended kind of how this is an important part of the entire onboarding process, and we're going to get to that over the next couple of webinars of the other pieces of this onboarding process, because I wish it was as simple as all you have to do is send somebody an employee handbook and then you're done onboarding. So we'll make sure we cover the rest of it for these next few webinars
Yeah.
too. So quickly, I'm going to go over the new listings for the week, and then we're going to get to the Q&A. There's already several in there, but if anybody has more questions, now's a good time to type them in when I'm going over the new listings. So 4 new listings this week. The first is a line haul listing out of Arkansas. It is 6 line haul runs at 1.5 million. This one has 7 employees, a manager, 6 dedicated solos. So if you're looking at getting something pure dedicateds out of the Arkansas area, this is a new one for you on the line haul side. The next 3 are P&D. So the first one is out of South Carolina. It's 20 P&D routes at $750,000. This one has 27 employees and a manager. And it is a newer fleet, relatively very low price as a percentage of revenue. It's about 32% of revenue. So if you have questions on that one, again, out of South Carolina. We also have the listings in a link in the chat that just went through. Next one's out of Tennessee. It is 9 P&D routes at $725,000. 10 employees and a manager, and a pretty low mileage operation in Central Tennessee, close to where I am. And then the next one is out of Pennsylvania. It is 9 P&D routes at 650,000. 12 employees and a manager, another really low mileage operation. So again, for P&D, we've got Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and South Carolina, and then the new one in Linehaul this week is out of Arkansas. No new big event. We've really done all of our events for this year. We have our full 2025 calendar that is launched for next year for all of our upcoming events, and we'll start talking about those in a little more depth in the coming weeks. For now, we'll kind of let you, as we finish our events for this year, we'll let you recover from those before we start talking about 2025. I know it's crazy that it's already almost here, but we're going to go ahead and jump into the Q&A now. So, Alex, I know you talked about it some, but for rear end collisions that you were pointing to,
Yeah.
how are they investigated to determine fault on the?
So there's a couple different things. First of all, you have to determine what type of rear-end collision are you involved in. Is it something that you rear-ended somebody, or is it something where you were rear-ended? If you rear-ended someone, FedEx is going to wonder, first of all, why didn't your forward collision avoidance and mitigation system prevent the rear end? And you've law and they're going to do an investigation there, and then they're going to try to figure out what happened and what's the situation. Like, was your driver cut off? Did somebody, like, I've seen it before where like the truck plowed into somebody because somebody tried to was trying to pass your truck, and they kind of like mistimed the truck and got hit from behind. Um, and in that situation, FedEx is one, we'll ask you, you can prove it that it was preventable or not preventable, but they're going to ask you like, why wasn't your driver slowing down when they became aware that somebody was trying to avoid it? Now, a lot of times you cannot be aware, you cannot see that person, and you can look at your video and say, hey, there's no way I could actually see that this guy was going to try to jump 3 lanes and then get in front of me. Sorry. Um, Now, where you've been invested, where you've had, where I was rear-ended, one of the things they want to know, they're watching my video, so I have to submit my video to them. They want to make sure that I'm maintaining or I'm slowing down in a controlled manner, like I'm not driving recklessly on the highway or in the road. When I got rear-ended, and in all three of my instances, actually two of my incidences, I was just driving, or God, I've had four this year. So I've two of my incidences, I was just driving, 65 miles an hour on a highway. And one of them I got rear-ended. I told you I got rear-ended by a DWI. The second one I got rear-ended by somebody who was high on, I think they said he was high on marijuana. Um, the third incident, I was slowing down as I approached a traffic incident, and I got rear-ended in that one. So there was an accident on the highway in front of me. We were slow, us and all the vehicles in front of us were slowing down, and somebody just, wasn't paying attention and slammed into the back of me. And the third one, I was actually parked in a truck stop, and somebody hit me from behind.
Jeez.
I mean, I was literally parked. Both my drivers are asleep. That one was kind of frustrating because they asked me for video. And so I had to submit video of the truck just sitting there for like 3 minutes, like it's all dark. And then all of a sudden you see the truck shake as it gets hit from behind. But yeah, you submit video. The video generally doesn't show, I mean, you want your driver. I mean, here's the big thing. You're going to want your driver, like, at least driving with one hand on the wheel. Preferably, you don't want them having to do like they should be driving professionally. You know, like I probably would have gotten into trouble if any of my drivers were sitting there driving like this. This is a bad look when you get rear-ended. You're probably going to lose. They're going to have an issue with that. And they're going to probably deem the accident was preventable just because you had a cell phone in your hand. So, in all my incidents, except for the one where the guy got rear-ended in a parking lot, my drivers were, slowing down. Most of them, I think all three of them, they had two hands on the wheel. They were doing everything professionally. And you hear them surprised, like, one of them's like WTF. The other one's like, his partner, and they're all team trucks. His partner's like, did we just get hit? Did somebody,
Yeah. Yeah.
did somebody just hit us from behind? And they're like, you see them like all of a sudden like looking in their mirrors, trying to see if there's somebody behind them. And so yeah, so it's usually that. And then what happens is you have to, as soon as you get into an accident, you have to provide notification to FedEx. I usually will have my manager call dispatch and say we have an accident, and then I will draft an email explaining what happened. And I want to make sure that I tell the story of what happened and make sure they understand that we were doing everything right and there's nothing we could have done to prevent this accident when we got into an accident. And I submit that information. And then FedEx wants you to collect pictures of the incident. They're going to want any video you have. They want to know the driver's information, the DOT officer's information that records all this stuff. And they want you to provide all that information back to them. And then they generally make a judgment. You'll get a notification from ARC, which is the Accident Review Committee, I think, or something like that. And then they'll make a determination usually within 10 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. So hopefully that answered your question on accident or dispute side. I mean, that is really the process, but the reason we have all this technology and all these cameras, obviously FedEx wants to know who's actually at fault, but it does end up helping you a lot of the time. If you are following the right standards, the right procedures. You need and want all of this technology to help validate that your drivers are so that you can get
I,
out of it.
I will say this. I had an accident a while back ago where I had a driver have a heart attack in the tractor, and we got into an accident. He hit the barrier. Luckily, he survived. He got medical attention and everything like that. But FedEx initially deemed it as preventable, and I'm like, we had a medical event. My driver had to go to, they're like, you lost control of your vehicle. It's preventable. And I'm like, no, there was extenuating circumstances. I used the the ATA's guide determining accident preventability. There is an actual situation in there where you have a medical emergency in the cab. I said, this is what happened. They watched the video. We watched the video multiple times, and it was clear that my driver was going through a medical emergency in the vehicle when he lost control of the vehicle, and I got the accident overturned, and it was determined to be non-preventable.
Yeah. Yeah. And in theory, you should always be able to really like it's not a fight with FedEx. It's just they just need proof. So you're just trying to show what happened.
Yeah, I mean, and there's plenty of accidents where I've watched the video and been like, okay, that's totally my fault.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
I'm not even going to contest it. Like, that was my fault. I'm sorry. Just
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
here's
okay.
the video. Here's my proof that he has safety forward, and here's the proof that I have FCAM, and I have all my indemnification. So let me know when you want my $2,500 check.
Right, right.
So,
Uh, Perfect. So next one here is from Eugene. I'll jump in on it and you can give any extra context too. But he said, what's the difference in deal structures between Linehaul and P&D? He said he sees lots of SBA loans on P&D, but not as many on Linehaul. I would largely say that there's no specific reason that Linehaul and P&D have to have different deal structures. We see lots of the same conventional SBA in both P&D and Linehaul cash, all of the above. I'd say if it's a full business, largely and it's an owned fleet, Linehaul is even better for SBA. Those assets are often more valuable. The reasons that I often see Linehauls not qualify for SBA, one is a challenging situation can be if the owner leases their fleet. It's not that it completely rules out the SBA, but those are no longer assets that can be a part of the deal in terms of collateral. So sometimes it just makes the deal a little bit more interesting in terms of what the SBA can support. But more often what I see is somebody selling, maybe they have 10 runs at a terminal and they're selling 4 of them. So they have history for their entire business, but it's not as clear the individual revenue and expenses for those 4 runs that they're selling. That can often make it more difficult to go through the SBA. So I wouldn't say there's that line haul in itself rules out the SBA. I'd say that there's just certain scenarios. And in P&D, we see that all the time too. You see somebody selling 2 zip codes instead of their whole business. It's a carve out. And I would also just say, if you're saying that there are 1,000 SBA deals in the FedEx space every year, there's just far more P&D deals that transact every year. So you'll see fewer line haul just because there are far fewer line haul deals that actually go through.
I mean, I would agree with a couple of those. One is that I think what I do see with P&D contractors, they're really good at segregating their businesses
Yeah.
into multiple entities. Like FedEx, for whatever reason, line haul, I'm a perfect example. I'm in 3 different states and they're all under one entity. Whereas you have a P&D guy who might operate in, say, Kansas City, Missouri and Kansas City, Kansas, and they'll have 2 different entities. And so what you get there is that you don't have the carve out function. And so you can be able to sell that at business. The other thing to remember is that Lino are bigger in general than P&D. And so a lot of times we're not eligible for SBA because we're too big of a business. I mean, think about it. There's only 1,700 contractors in the TSP space. Okay. So if you say 10% of the business's turnover in any given year, and I think that's even high for line haul, but say you have 10%, that's 170. Okay. And probably 25 to 30% of those businesses are gonna sell for more than $5.5 million. That just gives you an idea. And I think the cap right now on SBA financing is $5.5 million.
Still right around there.
Yeah.
So
So, I mean, that just gives you an idea. Like line haul businesses, we generate more revenue. If you think about it, I mean, just do the math, right? If you do 10,000 miles a week, that means you do 520,000 miles a year, give or take. That means your business is generating over $1 million in revenue. I'll go. Okay. I know. Sorry, my wife's telling me, reminding me that I have to go pick up my son in like 10 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, so so that gives you an idea, right? You have if your business is if you have $1 million business, and line haul trades not exactly at 100% of revenue. They trade in percentage as a percentage of EBITDA, but you're looking at, I mean, I would say, we could bring Butch on, but I would say most of those businesses are somewhere between 3.5 and 4.5 times EBITDA.
yeah. And they do often trend close, 90 to 110% of revenue. So it's not, that's not how we value it, but they do often end up close to their revenue. So yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, plenty of other questions we could answer there on, standard deal size and things like that. But I think those are kind of the right reasons that line haul and P&D can look different. It's not a strictly just to say that line haul's got something about it that makes it worse or different than for a bank. It's just
Better.
certain deal structures end
Better.
up.
We're just better
Yeah.
contractors.
No bias at all.
No bias at all. I mean, hey, ask Dave and Amy, what do they prefer? Do they prefer their P&D or their like?
They got to choose between their two kids. I'm not going to make them make that decision. Okay, so one here. So on the employee handbooks, have you ever seen somebody do more of kind of like a mobile app version of the employee handbook as opposed
I
to?
think some of the newer guys are doing that. Some of the guys who are a little bit more tech savvy. I'm 50. Actually, I take it back. I'm 49. And the
Don't
majority of my
you're away from yourself, Alex.
I'm 49, so I'm much more of a paper kind of guy. So I would say, I mean, I do make it available, and the guys can access it online. I know that I would say the average age of my drivers is probably in their mid 40s, and they're just more comfortable with paper versions. Um, I can probably count on one hand the number of drivers I have in their 20s, and I would say I have 47 drivers, and I think I might have four drivers in their 20s, maybe
Yeah,
three,
yeah,
just to give you an idea.
yeah.
So everybody's much more paper savvy. Like I mean, I had to pay a stipend to my drivers a couple of years ago to get the last couple guys to lose their flip phones and move to smartphones. So I had two drivers and two that when they rolled out MTA, I paid a stipend for a year to all the drivers so that they would convert over to.
Yeah, yeah, to bribe them to move into the 20th
I mean,
century.
I had a driver who wanted me to pay him in cash. He didn't trust banks.
It's like I can't do that actually.
Legally, I can't.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think the short answer for you in the Q&A is yes, those options are there and they may feel nicer for you as an owner, but just make sure it's something that your drivers actually will get more value out of because ultimately you want them to see it and hopefully they follow the standards because they're using it or reviewing it. But anything that increases the chance of them reading it and for some it may be paper if you have a good I'm sure there are vendors that are doing that
So
today.
it's great. I mean, ADP and Paychex both have it on their app. My employee handbook is on the app.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. This one from Andre is a hard question to answer quickly. I assume you're talking. So, question is, what's more profitable, residential or commercial deliveries? I assume this is P&D. Line haul, it doesn't. That's not. I mean, it would be. Yeah, line haul doesn't really work like that. For P&D though, this is a loaded question. In theory, the way FedEx creates all contracts is that they make territories and they pay you so that no matter what type of delivery you're doing, residential, suburban, in the middle of the city, that they all are valued properly and that they're accounting for the expenses that it takes you to make those deliveries and they're paying you properly on the revenue side. The way they calculate that is a little bit of a black box, but in theory, that is the way that FedEx has structured it. So no matter the type of stop, in theory, FedEx is paying you. So if let's say residential, which is higher mileage, more fuel cost, is more expensive to deliver, FedEx should be paying you more for those stops. So I would say it's less of a type of stop that dictates your profitability and more your ability to control the expenses that are related to the different types of stops that you incur. So if you're really good at managing your fleet, maybe you can be more profitable on the rural side because you've got to do more miles and they're more wear and tear on the vehicles, but you're great at fleet strategy and maintenance. Maybe that is something where you can be more profitable than the average contractor there. And on the urban side, you have to do a lot more stops, a lot more packages. Maybe if you're better at working your efficiency of your drivers and training, there's lots of things that could go into it around controlling expenses, but I wouldn't blanket say that a certain type of stop is more profitable. And then we'll just do this last one from Eugene. Just if you could do quick things on, he just got into the business with 4 routes. What are quick things that you would say are the most attractive things you look for when you're looking for line haul routes to buy?
No, I mean, the reason why I got into the space was because of the margins. Whether you are in a good year or in a bad year, your margins are pretty much the same. I mean, FedEx runs X number of runs on a daily basis. It's even in the last year where they've been flat revenue. My revenue, my revenue is year over year has increased, based off of the settlement, and my number of miles have stayed relatively flat. So, it's a recession-proof business. So I like the margins. I really appreciate it. I wanted a business that, I could grow with the rate that the economy grows in, and does really well both in a recession and in a good economy. What am I always focused on? Like we've talked about it before, Josh. Like my job is to be the business owner. I don't want to be an employee in my business. I want to be an owner of my business. So I spend a relentless amount of time of looking at, okay, how can I maximize my revenue and how can I minimize my expenses? So maximizing my revenue is how can I do more miles? How can I be the guy that FedEx calls and says, hey, we just had like today, like we need a rescue. We need you to go from here to there and from there to another place. And they called me up out of the blue and I said, yep, I got a driver, I got a truck, I can go do that for you. So that's me taking on more revenue than I was expecting this week. And then I'm constantly looking at, okay, my tires, my maintenance, my software, how can I get more, how can I save money? I'm constantly looking at those things. And that's what my job as an owner is to do, is to try to relentlessly work on my margins and to try to improve my margins, whether that's from operations or functionality or organizational change. That's what I'm always focused on.
Perfect. All right. Well, we're at the end of time here. So everyone, thank you for being on. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching. And Alex, as always, thank you so much for being here and for answering everybody's questions and providing your expertise.
Definitely. It was always a blast. Thanks.
Perfect. See you, everybody.